Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Think back to when you were in grade school. You had the first kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. You had teachers all throughout. And then you went on to junior high, and then you went on to high school, and then you went on to college. And think about all those teachers. And the one thing they all had in common was this, is they all had jobs. You know, they applied for a job. School needed a kindergarten teacher. They interviewed them. Everything was great, and they got a job. And from that point forward, for the next 30 years of their life, they hung on to that job, and they did a great job with that job of being a kindergarten teacher or seventh grade science or whatever. And the one thing that they never had to do to get their paycheck was to network. Now, there was networking going on in school, but they really never understood networking. So it's no wonder, and that continued on all the way through high school. And even when you get into college, you might get lip service in college from people at the business school or, you know, talking about, hey, what you need to do to be networked, but nobody really understood how to network. And that this whole notion of not networking, or not knowing how to network, we've come by it honestly, because we've never been taught, because the people who are teaching us things never really knew themselves. Today on the program, I have Vern Schellinger. Did I say that right, Vern?
Schellinger.
Okay, I'm sorry. Should have clarified before we hit go. But he's the Vern and I've talked to one another a couple times now. I was introduced to him back in 2022. But he's the president and CEO of an organization called Contacts Count. And he is an accomplished HR and learning and development professional. He has held senior level positions, senior vice president of HR, chief learning officer at some big companies, and he's worked with organizations such as Dunkin' Donut, the American Chemistry Council, the American Bankers Association, and has been involved with Lee Hecht Harrison. For those who are familiar, Lee Hecht is an outplacement agency where companies hire them to work with employees who have been downsized. So, Vern, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much, Frank. It's great to be here.
And go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I can certainly identify with everything that you were talking about in terms of people talking about how important networking is, but never teaching people how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe is a differentiator for Contacts Count, because we've developed 8 competencies that have specific skills and behaviors that we can teach people. And when they use those, they can improve their networking skills.
Yeah. If I could go back in time and be that senior in college and having that professor say you need to get networked, it's not what you know, it's who you know, I would love to challenge them. Well, what do you mean by that? When you say networking, what are you talking about? And I'm sure they would stumble over. No, it's just simple. You just, we're not going to cover it here. It's too basic. And it's probably the killer of more promotions, more failed, or, the responsibility of being responsible for more job failures, failed promotions, just, raises, whatever, because people just don't get it. They don't get it.
Well, I can tell you one example of where change may actually be taking place. This is one example. I just finished a program with the Georgetown law students. It was a group of students who were in a specialized program called the Business Law Scholars Program. And the person that created this program had an advisory council. And the advisory council were all Georgetown law graduates, partners in firms. And he asked his advisory council, what's the one skill that you didn't learn in law school that you wish you had learned when you were in law school? And to a person, they said business networking skills.
Yeah.
Which was, when they gave him that feedback, then he looked for somebody to put in some business networking skills into their curriculum. So that's what I've done for the last couple of years. Now, that said, the partners recognized it, given their experience of 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But some of the younger people, some of them, have really grasped it, and others kind of, that's not that important. So.
Well, and we'll jump into contact count and the work you do and the 8 competencies that you teach people. But what we're fed in school, and I went to law school, you're fed, know this material. You need to know this material, and this matters. And then you get a job, and it's like, just come in and execute on this. There are people out there bringing the work in. And you just kind of motor along, and you think, hey, I'm learning the material. I'm really smart. I've got this. And you don't realize that there's just this whole nother layer of that you have to be accomplished at. And as I indicated, it's killed a lot of people. A lot of people in the firm I was at moved themselves up because they were very competent with the material, but when it came time to make it rain in the firm, they couldn't.
Yeah.
They didn't know what to do. Good people, and they could probably figure they could certainly have used you. You guys teach 8 competencies. Obviously, contacts count is, there's a whole online program there. You have other things that you do, and I want you to talk on those. But what I'm trying to get at is, listeners, he's going to talk about the 8 competencies. Go ahead and take notes, but you need more than just the 20 minutes we're going to put in here to really understand this stuff. But just to kind of give you a flavor of really all what's out there. It's more than just smiling and having a good handshake. So,
and to that point, one of my favorite quotes is by Albert Einstein. He says, "Learning is an experience. Everything else is just information." So to all the listeners, Frank and I will give you a lot of information in these 20 minutes or so. But if you really want to improve your networking skills, you've got to put some time and effort into it. So the 8 competencies, the first competency is adopt a positive networker identity. And that really is about how you think and feel about networking. And everyone has a networker identity. It might be, I've tried networking, it doesn't work, I don't like it, therefore I don't want to do it anymore. That's your networker identity. And at the other end of the spectrum, there are people who have mastered networking. Master networkers find it easy, find it fun, find it comfortable, and they reap the benefits of having a broad, open, diverse network. And so your networker identity is based on a simple principle that every conversation you have is an opportunity to teach the other person something about who you are and what you're all about, and learn something about them in terms of who they are and what they're all about.
Right.
And the logic is very simple. The more I learn about Frank, who he is, what he likes, what he doesn't like, what his aspirations are, what his company is, what his business does, what he's looking for in his life, what problems he has, what challenges he has, the more I know about Frank, the greater likelihood I can help Frank in some way. And the better I teach Frank all of those same things about me, then more the greater likelihood Frank can help me in some way. And so then the second and the third competencies are all about teaching and giving. The second competency is communicate your expertise. So it's an opportunity whenever the opportunity presents itself, and it's not just communicate your expertise, it's teaching people about who you are. The third competency is engage others. This is the giving part. So I need to engage the other person when I'm in this conversation. I need to ask them good questions. I need to learn about who they are. And lo and behold, maybe in the first conversation or two, nothing happens. But after several conversations and you begin to know people pretty well, you're able to start giving to each other. And often it starts in simple ways. Hey, Frank, I saw this article on networking. I'm pretty sure you'd be interested to it. And I send it to you. Or Frank, there's someone in my network that I know you'd like to talk to, and I introduce you to this person. That's how you and I got introduced, by the way. Christine
Right.
Burrow introduced the two of us, right?
Yeah.
And
well, I guess a quick jump in on this,
Yeah.
just a question. The question I get from time to time is what happens when those things get out of order? I kind of look at it as, I tell people, listen, right? When you get in with people, listen,
Yeah.
well, what if the other person starts hitting you with questions?
that's all that, well, so
And if I'm getting
when
ahead,
that happens, when that happens, that's okay, because they're asking you, they're inviting you to teach them about themselves, okay?
Yeah.
Which is certainly fine. I have this saying, and it's kind of like a little voice in my head that says, okay, Vern, enough about you. And I literally stop the conversation and I say,
Yeah.
enough about me, Frank. Tell me a little bit about you. So it can be a fairly easy transition to get them to start to talk a little
Yeah.
bit about themselves.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so number one's mindset, just to kind of recap. Communicate expertise is number two.
Yeah.
And then number three is engage others. I kind of cut you off if you want to continue on with that.
Well, engage others, the analogy that we use is that of an iceberg. And we all know about an iceberg. When we're in those initial conversations, we're kind of seeing what's above the waterline.
Yeah.
But we know there's a whole lot more below the waterline, right? So so being mindful that we're just beginning to know about this person, and the more conversations we have, the more questions we have, the more thoughtful questions I can ask the person, we start to get below the waterline, and who is this person? What's their personality? What's their character? What are they, what is their competence? What are they really good at? And like I said, the more we learn, the greater likelihood we can help them. So that, and in a nutshell, that's what engaging others is all about. Yeah. So, and the goal is is at some point you build a relationship with other people that's trust-based and it's mutually beneficial. And that you can pick up the phone and call them or email them at any time and they'll respond, and vice versa. In fact, there's been multiple actual peer-reviewed studies that have proven that the number one predictor of career success is an open network.
Now, when you say open network, what do you mean?
Open, broad, diverse.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And the studies actually attributed at least 50% or more in terms of your career success, in terms of the amount of compensation you receive over your career, the amount of promotions you receive over your career, the industry recognition you might receive over the course of your career.
Yeah.
So it's a obviously, if that doesn't convince somebody that they really should want to auto learn on a network, I don't know what will. So,
well, I think people get into a comfort zone.
Yeah.
Again, back in my world, hey, I'm billing hours, making money for the firm, and again, it's like, I think we talked about this before we hit record. It's like people in their health, it's like, I'm not going to exercise. I'm 30. I'm fine. I'll be okay. I got time to catch up. And then they get into their 60s and there's 30 years of not exercising, sitting around, and then it really starts to catch up with you. And then it's hard. You can't make up for that lost 30 years in 3 weeks.
Yep.
Same thing with networking.
Yeah.
I know I should have been doing it for 10 years. What do I need to do? What can I do here in the next 2 months to get myself networked? Really nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. Other than start, right?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, to your point, you're at the bottom of the learning curve. It's going to take a while before you really develop the relationships that you need. Yeah. So adopt a positive network or identity, communicate your expertise, engage others. The fourth competency is take a strategic approach. And interestingly enough, on our networking competency assessment, this often is one of the lower scores. And I think it's because people don't even really think about taking a strategic approach when they're networking. I'm just talking to people. But from a return on investment standpoint, I mean, you spend time, which is our most precious resource, networking with others. And sometimes there's money involved. You're paying to go to a conference, or the networking event is charging you $25 or whatever it is. So you're investing time and money in all of your networking activities. And like I said, it's about getting a return on investment in terms of that time. You step back and again, be strategic. What are your goals? What do you want to accomplish with your networking activities?
Right.
Who are the people in your network now that you think could help you? And where would you find other people like them that could potentially help you? And then how do you connect to those people? So that's all like sitting down and kind of thinking and planning this out to some degree, so that you're doing the best you can to maximize your, like I said, your time and money in terms of investing it, in the whole aspect of building relationships.
I agree. I totally agree. Number 5.
Number 5 is develop trust-based relationships. And this is an evolution of the different types of conversations you have to eventually get to the point where, again, it's a trust-based, mutually beneficial relationship. We've kind of identified all the different types of conversations you can have, and there's only 5 or 6. One, there's accidents. You sit next to somebody on a plane, you have this great conversation, and it's one and done, and it's over and done with. There are acquaintances in your life, friends of friends, relatives of relatives that you can be introduced to. And then there are what we call associates. And associates literally, and this is an important point for people who are just getting into networking or thinking about networking, or they don't know who to network with. Associates, every one of us have thousands of associates in our world, because associates are all of the people that work with you in your organization. They're all of the people who attend wherever you worship. They're all of the members of your gym. They're all of the members of the PTA that you belong to. If you're in a club or a hobby, all of those people are associates. And the reason we label them as associates is you have something in common. You have that one thing in common. And you typically see these people on a regular basis. And what we say is, you really do have permission to talk to them at any point in time. And it's not a hard conversation, right? You're walking in from the parking lot, and you're walking into the office, although people don't walk into the office too much anymore.
No, they don't.
But at any event where there's people that, again, it's part of your common group,
right?
It's pretty easy enough to say, let's use the parking lot one. It's an easy one to, hey, Frank, I know you work here. I've seen you around, but I really don't know much about you. What department do you work in? You tell me what department, and typically you'll say, what department did you work in? And so I might ask you, so what's the biggest project or challenge you're working on now in finance? And it begins the conversation.
And that gets back to what you said earlier. And then when I asked the question, what's an open network mean? And you've just defined it.
Yeah.
That's what an open network. It doesn't mean just getting to know the person to the right and left of you in cubicles. Everybody. Yeah. And so that group of associates is a huge base from which anybody can work from to start to build their network. And the first conversation is fairly easy, as opposed to, I'm going to this networking event. I don't know anybody at the networking event. And sometimes that really goes pretty badly, because somebody goes to a network event and doesn't talk to anybody, and they go home, right? Yeah, and they swear it off. This thing doesn't work, right? Yeah, give it one try.
Right. Yeah. So once you begin to have these conversations, whether it's with an acquaintance or an associate, you're actively involved and engaged in a conversation. And over time, and our research shows you've got to have a minimum 6, 12, maybe more conversations before you really get to know someone. And what you're aspiring to, if you really want to build your network, is creating someone that we call your advocate. And an advocate is that trust-based, mutually beneficial relationship where the two of you will help one another at any point in time, pick up the phone, email them, they're there for you. And you're thinking of them and they're thinking of you even when you're not in contact. Hey, Frank, I emailed you and I said, hey, I saw this article. Well, I saw the article, I thought of you and I sent it to you. And we're not even having any kind of conversation at that point, but I'm thinking about you.
Right.
Yeah. And so we actually have a little quiz where we say, well, there's 2 questions that we ask. How many advocates would you like to have in your network? And the answer to that is pretty simple, as many as you possibly can.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. And then the second question is, how many advocates do you actually have in your network today?
Yeah.
We have a little quiz that you can take to determine whether someone's really your advocate or not. Now, I say that, but it's also important to recognize that we're all human beings. We only have so much time and energy. I mean, You're never going to have 500 advocates. I mean, it's just impossible to keep up with that, people.
Well, the problem with that, Vern, is that you need to service them in return.
That's right. That's right.
That's the limiting factor, I find.
Yeah.
So
it's just, and this is one of the things that happens on LinkedIn. I mean, you get this digital connection, but you don't know the person from, you don't really know them at all, other than what you can read on their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
So, and then from advocates, the last group of people in your network are what we call your allies. And those folks are what we refer to as your personal board of directors.
Right.
These are the people that are really your closest. They know you deeper and more than anyone else, but that's not a large group of people. And it might be a sibling, it might be a best friend, it might be somebody you went to college with, might be a former boss. It could be anybody that you've really developed that deep of a relationship with. And so that, and all of the other skills that we talked about, communicating your expertise, engaging others, thinking strategically, they play into this series of different types of people that you run into. And certainly when you're talking to an associate for the first time, again, you think about the iceberg, you're just kind of starting to get to know them. But the more conversations you have, the deeper you get to know them, the more they get to know you. So, and then the 6th competency is what we've referred to as networking gracefully. And this is kind of there's a lot of rituals with networking that some of them, I don't even know where they got started. And some of them I don't think are very good. But there's always the name exchange, which, people say I can never remember names. And there's a reason for that. And so there's a skill and there's a technique we can teach people to better remember names. It's not 100% foolproof, but we can improve someone's ability to actually remember people's names.
Right.
And then it's again, back to what I was referring earlier, being conscious that it's a two-way conversation. And also, if it is a networking event, how do you, I see 3 or 4 people over there. How do you join that group? How do you leave a group, if there's someone else you want to meet? So it's being aware of those rituals and the little things you can do to make those transitions smooth. Most importantly, it's about the concept of likability. And if you Google likability, you will be amazed at the number of hits for likability, and there's been at least 15 or 20 books written on it. And these are kind of like mom, apple pie and the American flag. I mean, these are so basic to human etiquette, human, beings just being human and saying thank you and
Right.
thanks a lot and doing all of those simple things that make someone like you, right? Or and respect you and experience your character and competence. The more that you experience someone and their values and their character, and the more you experience their competence, the greater view of you have of them, the stronger, it's someone you want to be connected with. So, and then the last two competencies. So the seventh competency is envision your ideal network. And that is helping people understand they have at least 4 distinct networks, one of which is your work network. These are the people that you work with day in and day out, week in and week out. So if you're in an organization, it's all everyone in your department. It might be people in other departments that you rely on to help you get your work done. It might involve a vendor. It might involve a consultant who you work with on a regular basis. If you're a solo entrepreneur, it's all of the other people in your world. I mean, no solo entrepreneur, they got to have tech help somewhere. At some point in time, they need to get in touch with an attorney. It's all of those support people that you need in your world to make the business to run. Your second network is what we call an organizational network. And this specifically talks about, organizations where there's more than, 10 or 15 employees. You go to 1,000 employees and, you've got your work net, which might be 20 employees, might be 10, might be maybe 30, but you got another 900 people in the organization that you could meet. If you're not in an organization, it's simply anybody else that is, connected to you in some way through the work that you do. Then there's your professional network. So if you're in, HR, you belong to the Society of Human Resource Management. If you're in training and development, it's the Association of Talent Development. You're a CPA, it's the CPA Association. Those are people that do what you do. And then the fourth one is your personal network, your family, your friends and neighbors, that type of thing.
Sure.
And so being mindful that you have these 4 networks helps you think about, okay, how do I broaden my network? Which of those 4 networks do I need to have more connections in? Maybe it's your professional network. And the last competency is the culmination of all of the 7. It's basically about achieving more, giving more, and learning more. And if you use all of these competencies in all of your different networks, you'll achieve more. You'll create more value for yourself in terms of your career, more value for your team, more and in an organization, more valuable for the organization in terms of innovation, in terms of collaboration, in terms of products and services.
Gotcha. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
The best way to get a hold of me is to go to the website. It's contactscount.com.
Yep.
And there's plenty of information on there. There's a free assessment. It'll take 5 minutes of your time to get just a sense of the competencies and how you stack up. There's certainly a way to contact me directly from the website and set up a free, no obligation call. And obviously there's what the products and services that we offer, things as simple as taking the networking competency assessment, which is a more involved, in-depth, it actually is a 12-page report on your skills and abilities for the all 8 competencies. There's coaching programs. As I mentioned earlier, the very first online program has been developed and is ready for sale. And for organizations, there's also, we've done a number of work with organizations. I'm going to be doing something with a biotech firm in September. I mentioned Georgetown Law School. It doesn't matter what organization we go into, if they're interested and really willing and able and want to learn networking, we can work with the individuals in a team and help each one of them.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate your time here today.
Thanks so much, Frank. I appreciate being on and look forward to future connections with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.